at acutrumbbes@ctps.org or 857-702-3682 or via the chat box. The meeting guidelines state that all participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After the roll call, members may mute and unmute themselves, but please always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar, and the chair will then call on participants. And if you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. So with that, we'll move on to introductions. I'll go ahead and call the roll here. My name is Derek Cravat. I am the chair of the UPWP committee representing MassDOT Office of Transportation Planning. Do we have MAPC? Don't see Julia. We'll move on to Town of Arlington for the at-large town. City of Boston. City of Framingham.
Sorry, Derek. Jim Fitzgerald.
Oh, hey, Jim. Oh, no problem.
Sorry about that. With BPDA. City of
Boston. City of Framingham. Town of Rentham.
I do not see Rachel.
Okay. Yep. Thanks, Dave. City of Newton.
Hi guys, David Kozis representing Mayor Fuller and City of Newton.
Great. Town of Norwood.
Hi, Tom O'Rourke from the town of Norwood, representing Trick.
Great. City of Somerville.
I do not see Tom Bent.
Okay. Regional Transportation Advisory Council.
Leonard Diggins, excuse me. Leonard Diggins Advisory Council there.
Great. And the MBTA Advisory Board.
I do not see Brian either.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone. We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is public comments. Is there anyone present that would like to make a public comment? All right, seeing none, move on to the next item, which is a summary of the March 7th, 2024 UPWP committee meeting. I'll ask for a motion and second to approve that meeting summary. Tom Bent.
Hello, sorry, I came in late. I was having trouble, and when I get the invite, it comes over as a Google Meet.
Right.
And so then I had to kind of go back and figure out, it's actually a Zoom. So I'm not sure why it does that.
Yeah, it came up like that for me too. But we can work on that for next time. Yep.
Yeah, it's happened a few times. So, so when that happens, I'm scrambling, but I'll make a motion to on the action item for the summary of to approve the summary of the March 7th, 2024 meeting.
Thanks, Tom. Leonard?
I'll second that.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes? Right, seeing none, I'll read the roll. Jim Fitzgerald.
Yep. Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
David Kozis.
David Kozis, yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Tom Bent.
Tom Bent, yes.
Leonard Diggins.
Diggins, yes.
Great. And I see Julia's on now as well. Julia, do you want to vote on the meeting minutes from March 7th?
Yeah, sorry, I must have been clicking all sorts of wrong Zoom links. I was just sitting in some Zoom room all by myself waiting. Anyway, yes, the minutes, March 7th, is that the one that I was at that one. Julia Wallers, yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Julia. All right, so that passes then. We'll move on to our next item, which is the federal fiscal year 2024 UPWP amendment number 2. I'll turn it over to Srileka.
Thank you, Derek, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending today's committee meeting. Next slide, please, Abby. My first presentation today is on Amendment 2 to the Federal Fiscal Year 2024 UPWP. Amendment 2 consists of adjustments to ongoing work program budgets. The details of which budgets are being adjusted can be found within the memo posted to the meeting calendar for today, which also contains the redlined and clean versions of the UPWP to track the changes in budgets. These adjustments are primarily made to respond to evolving needs, staff capacity, and staff attrition. Similar to previous adjustments we have presented on program budget specifically, a reduction in a budget does not indicate that the work planned will not be completed. It just means that staff went back, looked at what work has been planned for the fiscal year, and have decided that they do not need as many resources as anticipated to complete said work. An example of this would be the budget for the Long Range Transportation Plan program. Due to staff attrition, the budget for that has been reduced, although now that we've got Aaron McGuire on board, we will still be completing the planned work for the rest of this fiscal year. These adjustments do have a net zero impact on the overall budget of the UPWP. Next slide, please. Today, I'm requesting that this committee vote to waive the 21-day public comment period and approve this amendment as presented. We're asking you to waive the comment period so that staff have adequate time to commence and complete any planned work before the end of the fiscal year with that adjusted program budget. Looking ahead, I will be presenting this amendment to the MPO board on April 18th. But with that, I am happy to take any questions or provide any clarifications if necessary, and I'll turn it back to the chair.
Great. Thanks, Srileka. Are there any questions on this amendment? Okay, I don't see any. So like Srileka said, this is largely to adjust for kind of status of ongoing tasks and remaining budgets as we near kind of not sort of like get closer to the end of the federal fiscal year, just to make sure everything's lining up. So I will then ask for a motion to waive the comment, or I guess recommend to the MPO waiving the comment period for this UPWP amendment and recommending approval.
Leonard so moves.
Great. Thanks, Leonard. Is there a second? Tom?
I'll second that.
All right, great. Motion having been made and seconded, I will call the roll. Julia Wallers.
Julia Wallers, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald.
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
David Kozis.
David Kozis, yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
O'Rourke, yes.
Tom Bent.
Tom Bent, yes.
Leonard Diggins.
Diggins, yes.
Great. And I vote yes as well. All right, so that takes care of the amendment. We'll move on to the main agenda item for today, which is this discussion on discrete studies and the results from the survey. So I'll turn it back over to Srileka before we move into the discussion.
Okay, thanks so much. So this presentation will provide an overview or really a review of the universe development and study selection process to date and some context around staff process in developing their recommended list. I will present said list and some potential funding scenarios based on that list we developed, and then open it up for discussion. So the development of UPWP study ideas really begins with our fall outreach, where we are attending meetings of the MAPC's of regional committees. We are hosting a public survey, and we are attending meetings of the advisory council, along with numerous staff conversations and presentations to this committee, as well as RTAC. This ranking survey just represents just one part of all of the conversations and outreach we have undertaken over the last few months on this universe of proposed studies. So these scenario recommendations took into careful consideration the committee's feedback, especially what was provided at the last two meetings. alongside the following. A given scenario's alignment with the MPO's vision, goals, and objectives, alignment with overall agency priorities for the year, a review of scheduled and ongoing programmatic work, staff resources and capacity, and the potential for the work to be completed within one fiscal year. Next slide, please. 6 committee members and 6 staff members participated in the survey, and results demonstrated a range of priorities between both groups with some notable overlaps. Taking all this into consideration, staff chose studies that can be funded at a range of levels and in a variety of combinations. I will note now that some studies were chosen based on feedback from committee members at previous meetings and additional staff review. And for the last little bit of context setting, we are working with a discrete studies budget of $150,000 for FFY 2025, which is level funded from FFY 2024. Next slide, please. So on the screen here is the list of staff recommended studies. M2, Blue Bikes and MBTA connections. We are renaming this from bikes and trains. M3, mode shift, what would it take to move the needle? M4, roadway pricing, balancing the need for a transition to sustainable mobility with equity concerns. And F2, decarbonizing the freight sector, exploring the potential for using e-cargo bikes for first and last mile freight deliveries. Next slide, please. Again, I do want to reiterate that we took all of the feedback that we received from the committee into consideration, as well as the other factors listed on this slide. In our discussion as staff, we noted that some studies can be flexible in their timelines and in their budgets. For example, M4, the roadway pricing study, could be completed within a very short time frame, as in within the first quarter of the fiscal year, to align with the release of results from Governor Healy's Transportation Funding Task Force. Next slide, please. Once studies are selected, every year staff go back and refine those descriptions that were initially presented to be written in a way that they are included in Chapter 4 of the UPWP. Part of that refinement means that some study descriptions might be reworked to better clarify the questions being asked and the goals of the study. For example, M2 would focus more directly on the relationship between blue bikes and transit. F1, Sustainability and Decarbonization in the North Suffolk Region, Part 2, will be incorporated into consideration within the freight program's planning and prioritization process. After the last committee meeting, staff took a second look at these proposed studies under the freight category specifically, and determined that due to the level of effort and resources needed to undertake a second part of the North Suffolk Freight Study, it would be best suited to be considered as part of the freight program's work planning process. In its stead, staff are suggesting F2, decarbonizing the freight sector. This suggestion is based on comments we received and heard at the last committee meeting on the interest in seeing a decarbonization of freight study. F2 does address this issue through the very specific lens of e-cargo bike delivery. And there are staff within this meeting who are prepared to answer questions on this study. The decision that we made relating to these two studies shows kind of the need to prioritize studies that can be completed within a fiscal year. And as staff, we sort of decided that whatever work we want to do for the North Suffolk Part 2 study wouldn't necessarily be able to be completed in a year if we were to do this work justice. So this is something that we're considering as part of a multi-year effort. Next slide, please. We developed 4 scenarios that incorporate these projects in different ways. 2 of them include roadway pricing and mode shift, and are supplemented with either the freight or blue bike studies. And 2 ensure that the freight and blue bike studies are funded, and then include either the roadway pricing or mode shift studies. So with all of that said, here are the 4 scenarios that staff developed. So scenario 1 it consists of roadway pricing, mode shift, and the blue bike study. Scenario 2 is roadway pricing, mode shift, and decarbonizing the freight sector. Scenario 3 is roadway pricing, blue bikes and MBTA connections, and decarbonizing the freight sector. And scenario 4 is mode shift, blue bikes and MBTA connections, and decarbonizing the freight sector. So that was a lot. And once we jump into discussion, I will share my screen with these 4 scenarios up again with their titles. Oh no, next slide is fine. So today I am asking for you all to discuss and decide on a final list of studies to fund in federal fiscal year 2025. Looking ahead, staff are working hard on developing the document, and I hope to be able to present the draft federal fiscal year 2025 UPWP to this committee in early May. So with that, I'll turn it back to the chair to facilitate a discussion, and I will share my screen.
Great. Thanks, Srileka. So did you say you're pulling up the scenario summary again?
Yes, it's just so
Oh, okay.
able to see it's an Excel spreadsheet.
Great. Yeah, it's helpful to have the names and the numbers in the same. Are you able to scroll up a little bit? Oh. Okay, great. Okay. So scenario 1 is railway pricing, mode shifts, and blue bikes, MBTA connection. Scenario 2. Yeah. And scenario. Okay, scenario 4 is mode shift, blue bikes, and decarbonizing. Okay. Okay. Julia.
Yeah, is it typical to fund these studies at different levels? I don't know how, like, historically these decisions have been made, or what criteria we'd be looking at to justify one more than the other. So, like, what's our precedent for this?
Yeah, I would say typically we are able to fund studies at in a kind of range, but it would depend on how much work we're able to get done within that budget. So I think in previous years, one example I can remember is the Lava Municipal Parking Phase 2 study, or even in Phase 1. The proposed budget for those studies was somewhere in the realm of 70 to 80K, but by cutting down on the budget, we're obviously reducing on the amount of work we can do, but we are, in that case, spreading out the work over 2 years. So there is precedent for funding studies within a range. It's just going to affect the amount of work we can get done.
David?
Yeah, thanks. I guess I need to go back and remember F1. I didn't remember anything about e-bikes. Is that what you were saying? It has to do with e-bike deliveries? I don't understand what that means. Can we have a little bit more description of that? Thanks.
Yeah. Let me pull up the
E-cargo bikes, right?
e-cargo
I think
bikes.
that piece is missing. Yeah. They're like big, higher capacity utility bikes.
So was this originally listed in the F1 that it has to do with, we're talking about delivering products on an e-bike?
Yes.
Okay. Is that what we all understood that to be when we ranked it? Or
It sounds like you did some exercise internally, right, and came up with a revised scope because as written, this might fall more under the freight program, and it sounds like as written too, this would be like a whole region-wide analysis, right? That might be beyond the scope of the UPWP discrete studies budget. So proposing to kind of hone in on that e-cargo bikes for first last mile freight delivery segment. Is that right?
Yeah, so I think there are 2 parts there. One is that, yes, we took a second look at the North Suffolk study, which was initially proposed as F1.
Okay,
up
that's
here. And we decided kind of as staff that that would be best completed within a program since it is a pretty big scope, it's a pretty big undertaking, and it would not be able to be completed within one fiscal year. So based on some of the conversation that we'd heard at the last committee meeting, we're suggesting F2 as a potential replacement for F1, which I will note ranked fairly well among the committee, as a way to still address issues of decarbonization, just through a very specific lens.
Okay, thanks, Shalika. Does that answer your question, David? We voted on F2 as part of the ranking survey, right? That was included.
No, we did not.
Oh, we did.
Yeah.
Okay. But when you say favorable, it was kind of like based on the discussion, it was like
Right, just
perceived. Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So I was like taking comments or discussion, and that seemed to be of interest. So we're proposing that that might replace F1.
Okay. Leonard?
First, can you please go back to the scenarios? I want to take a picture of scenarios 3 and 4 so that I can go back and forth on my own. I mean, is there any reason that we can't get either the spreadsheet or a PDF of it or something so that we can look at it however we want, when we want, during the meeting, and certainly after the meeting, but it'd be nice if we could do so during the meeting, So that's a request, and the other question I have is, I can't take a picture. Anyways, while this is so the request that I have, question I have is, can we get a sense of the other things that are going to be done? As a part of UPWP, like we have these multimodal studies and other things that we do, and I'd just like to have a sense of what those are. I take it the staff probably took that into account in developing the scenarios, but I'd like to get a sense of what else is being done because that might help decide like what really complements other things that we're doing as part of UPWP.
So I guess the UPWP encompasses all the work that the MPO does. So there's like the multimodal work that we focus on. There's also our congestion management work. There's our climate resiliency, performance-based planning, our transportation equity, public engagement. The details of exactly what each of us are going to be working on next year are still kind of being hashed out internally. But the document encompasses just everything that we're planning on doing next year.
All right, I understand, and it may be, a big request. I'm not asking for the draft of the report, but some sense, because it used to be that we would at least see like the multimodal studies, and we say, okay, part of the monies are already being devoted to these other projects like the corridor studies. I think we're maybe multimodal studies and we go, okay, even though we're not getting to pick those because staff has already picked them, at least you get a sense of what they are and maybe the extent to which. And the reason I'm curious, it might give us a sense as to what discrete projects of the monies that are left, we would complement them, So at whatever level you can give us some insight into that, would be appreciated. If you can't because of bandwidth issues, then that's just what it is. So, all right, thank you.
Specifically for the multimodal
studies.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Specifically for the multimodal studies, I'll ask Ronak Basu, who's the manager of our multimodal mobility infrastructure program, to speak to those.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share more about the multimodal mobility infrastructure program. But before that, I just wanted to clarify that we looked at the descriptions of both F1 and F2, and one of the ideas, the idea in particular that's on here around using cargo e-bikes for first last mile freight deliveries, that was not included in the survey sent out to the committee, which is why I think some folks may feel that they haven't seen that idea before. It was certainly in the universe. And after having taken a look at the idea that was ranked quite highly, which is a follow-up to the decarbonization of the freight sector in the North Suffolk area idea that was proposed, we felt that it would be better to pursue that through the freight program and perhaps spread it out over multiple years as an ongoing effort. And this idea around using cargo e-bikes seemed to lend itself better to a more bounded structure that could be completed within a year, within the scope and budget that the UPWP allows us to. So happy to take any questions on that before I share a little bit more about the multimodal studies that we're planning on doing next year.
Great. Thanks, Ronak. So Tegan, did you want to expand on that?
No, I will definitely let Ronak continue to elaborate on the multimodal program, and then I may add one more comment after that.
Okay, great. Yeah, I see hands from David and Tom as well. Did you want to jump in on that one, on the F2 question?
Yeah, I did. I'm still just trying to understand this. Is it looking at, I guess, air quality benefits, I guess, of using e-bikes to replace motorized vehicles for, food deliveries, not considering any sort of electric vehicle, electric vehicle that's not a bike? Just, I mean, is that the whole point, is air quality improvements of using electric bicycles?
I'd say more than the air quality benefits, we're also looking at safety. So when we were working on the North Suffolk study, we heard a lot of concerns around safety with these smaller trucks that are going out for delivery, such as Amazon vans and the like, which are used for the first last mile deliveries. So we heard concerns around those vehicles, primarily centered on safety. And Boston right now, the city of Boston is doing this pilot looking at the feasibility of using cargo e-bikes for food delivery. So that's just one application of cargo e-bikes, but they could certainly be used for first last mile deliveries related to online shopping as well. And other places in the country are starting to explore these ideas, and they're doing pilots. So we thought that it would be prime right now to build on the North Suffolk study and explore the feasibility of trying out something like this in conjunction with regional freight hubs that would allow us to perhaps eliminate or at least reduce the number of trucks or smaller vans that are used for first last mile deliveries.
I guess go ahead to the next person. I need to absorb this a little more, I guess. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Tom?
Thank you. Yeah, I think, when Len was talking, I thought he was getting at what are the other studies we do besides these discrete studies we're looking at here, the ongoing studies, things like, looking at intersections, roadways, corridors, and things like that. And I'd be interested to know if we are still doing those, what some of those might be, because frankly, these studies here really are all Boston centric and don't really do much for have much impact on our communities outside of Boston.
Thanks, Tom. Julia?
Yeah, I just want to get back to the e-cargo bike freight study. It's in addition to air quality, this is really about congestion and curbside management because of the extreme rise in delivery vehicles taking up a lot of space, making a lot of trips, not necessarily with a lot of inventory, and not just making the streets less safe because they're big, heavy vehicles and have a lot of impact, but they crowd the curb and they go places where buses need to go and where bike lanes could go. And you just don't need to take up that much space, especially in these denser urban areas. So this study really builds on that pilot that Boston's doing, and MAPC has been conducting a body of research around e-bike delivery. And e-bike, we don't necessarily mean like a bicycle with a basket, although if anyone's been to New York City lately, you might see the streets are just jammed with these delivery e-bike guys that are all in black, and it's a battery operated bike, and they have like a front or a back rack or a big backpack. And there's entire curbs dedicated just for these bikes to park. And if you imagine how much space that's saving, it unlocks the curb for multimodal use, for parklets, for all those things. So it's just it ties into land use and how we're using our streets. And it's kind of like a rising field. So things like freight don't quite fit the body of work, and e-bike doesn't quite fit the body of work, although it could. So I think this study like opens up the capacity to bring in those perspectives.
Thanks, Julia. Tom?
Thank you. I think Julia might have helped me understand this one a little bit better. Because you know, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, what are we trying to eliminate? You know, FedEx drivers, UPS drivers. You know, I'm trying to get a better handle on it. Because
think Grubhub, Grubhub,
well,
Amazon,
okay. Yeah. So well, even Amazon, you know, they have a fleet of trucks like UPS and FedEx now. So I'm just wondering, you know, how this would, you know, in reality, how would this work? I do see in here that such a system depends on establishment of neighborhood freight hubs. So it would really be upending the whole system that's there now. You know, so I guess this would be interesting. I'm just wondering how business would really react to this and what the cost would be. And then, like you just said, though, Julia, you have like, it sounds like you have scores of bicycle, you know, e-bike deliveries running through New York City. And is that making
it's
things
striking? Yeah.
No, but is it making things any safer? You know, so that's a question I have. It just seems like it's I'm just trying to figure out what are we trying to do here, and what are we trying to replace. But thank you, that did help kind of clarify this a little bit for me. Thanks.
Yeah. Leonard?
Once one of them whizzes by you, Tom, you get good at looking out for them, and it becomes like second nature. And so
and you're glad it's not a truck.
yeah.
But Len, what's going on out there now is there's so many things whizzing by you now. There's a lot out there, you know what I mean? And that's part of the issue is like, how do you control all this, you know?
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, I have e-bikes whizzing by me on the sidewalk, you know, when I'm walking, just saying, and to a certain extent, you just hope that they're looking out for you, because goodness knows you can't look out for them because you don't see them until they're on you. You know, and to Tom's point, I mean, yes, that is what I was asking for. Yeah, I just wanted to get a broader scope to understand, you know, how what we are looking at may complement them. And sometimes I just need to kind of satisfy my curiosity so I can like just clear my brain deck, you know, or brain, so that I can focus on the other things that are in front of me. But I always am careful, you know, or try to be considerate, meaning that satisfying my curiosity comes at the cost to other people, and I can't overburden them, you know, and to the extent I can get the information myself, I try. But from the preliminary discussions, and I'm going to put this out there just so you can like track how many times I changed my mind over the course of our decision, you know, I'm now leaning towards scenario 2. And I appreciate the enlightenment about what's going on with F1. And the one reason I like trying to make things safer for cyclists is that I think that well, part of it has to do with the curb. Another part that I like about the studies, I think it will do some curb management and allow us to take greater advantage of the curb. So I like scenario 2, you know, because of that study, but also because it has the roadway pricing and the mode shift. And just one more thing, Derek. So I noticed that it seems like you scored the roadway pricing low, you know, and then when I saw that, it made me like reconsider. But then I remembered that we did say that even though there may be some work done by the TF squared, the Transportation Funding Task Force, that we would be able to complement this work and also their work, and also do it in a time frame that would benefit them. So I'm leaning back towards like supporting that study strongly. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you, Leonard. Others on that? Okay, so I see Srileka shared the link to this in the chat. So if folks want to bring that up, that's an option now too. So that's helpful on just understanding F1. Are there other thoughts on, since that one is one of the ones, it might be helpful maybe to yeah, just talk about each one and kind of go through them. But I see, David, did you want to weigh in again on that one?
Yes, and thanks, Julia, for trying to clarify it. I understand it a little better now. I never really thought about it before. I sort of wonder, with the e-bikes being so small, with limited room to store stuff, does that mean that they have to constantly go back to pick up, like in between every delivery instead of, with maybe a larger vehicle, I can imagine that they go one time to pick up a whole bunch of deliveries and then sort of go about their route. So maybe that's a downside, but I
There's
also
big,
can see
the
that
fleet
it
varies.
sort of, takes up a lot less space on the curb, so that could be an advantage. So maybe it's interesting. I just never thought about it before.
Yeah, there's a good link in the chat about that, but some of them, there's all different e-bike fleets. The cargo piece is what's considering the word that sort of changes the outcome of e-bike to cargo bike. Some have like big, like truck looking thing in the back, because sometimes they go around, even like DPW fleets can have e-bikes, but they have a big like container on the back or the front that allows quite a lot of inventory to be carried. So it's definitely an emerging field. And I think that's where a study is particularly interesting, and it's disruptive too.
Leonard?
And getting me thinking about it, you could, instead of warehouse, David, being like really far away, you could have like these like sub warehouses, like these little nodes, that are in places. So instead of them, you're thinking that like they might have to trek 10 miles across town, you could like set up nodes that are closer, so that they're trekking back and forth along smaller distances. Yeah, well, the good part about studies that, make you think about things that you hadn't thought of before is that you really learn something. So I'm intrigued, so that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Leonard. Okay, so I think that's some good. Oh, Julia, did you want to jump in?
I know, I just put in the chat, like the link to what's already underway with e-cargo bike deliveries.
Great, awesome. Okay. I'm curious, sort of have addressed a few of these now, but how can we go over M2 again? That one is the blue bikes and MBTA connections. I think in the original sheet, it was the bikes and trains. Could you just, or maybe refresh folks on what this one is, what it would entail?
Yeah, so for this one, I will ask either Ronak or Rebecca to dive into some more of the details and some of the changes that we might have been considering.
Yeah, happy to share a little bit, and Rebecca can jump in if she'd like to expand on that. I can go through the ideas and then we could deliberate over the scenarios. So the roadway pricing idea is more from an analytical perspective, where we've been exploring a couple of different data sets. The first is the replica data set that we have access to, that provides high resolution mobility patterns. So we know how many people are traveling along each road segment. We know the different travel modes, time of day, where they're coming from, where they're going, and so on. So it's really quite granular. The other data set is the Massachusetts vehicle census that tells us how many miles have been driven based on the location of vehicle registration, which almost always is the home or residence location. Not always, but almost always. So we know how much people are driving based on their residential location. And the replica data set allows us to also look at where they're traveling. Are they passing through downtown? Are they coming into downtown, and so on? So these data sets allow us to really explore potential hypothetical scenarios of roadway pricing. So thinking about a cordon-based pricing scenario, for instance, if we were to draw a circle around downtown, similar to what New York is exploring, and try out different pricing schemes, having income tiered pricing schemes, also differentiating revenue, the roadway pricing charges based on place of residence, keeping in mind equity and where EJ communities reside. So I think that could be a really interesting sort of analysis, and that is why we wanted to prioritize that. the idea on blue bikes and MBTA connections has been renamed. So what had happened based on the UPWP idea, well, the universe where we were describing the ideas, is that there was an idea that was ranked quite highly by the committee, which was termed blue bikes and transit, but the description had nothing to do with blue bikes, unfortunately. The idea suggested looking at the utilization of bike racks on buses or at train stations. And there was a separate idea that proposed looking at the interaction between blue bikes and transit, in particular, trying to understand what kinds of trips and what kinds of connections are more likely to be substituted or supplemented, and we'd like to build more of those connections and routes, which would help us in integrating blue bikes and transit to supplement transit. So that would be what we would like to explore in this project. And the final idea around mode shift is to look at what different municipalities across or regional entities like MPOs are doing across the country, similar to the roadway pricing work, where we would first of all create a list of different efforts that are ongoing and then build a short list for interviewing. So we'd like to interview key staff who are involved with climate action plans or other transportation action plans where there are clear goals laid out for mode shift, to understand more about the process. So most of us, I think, are aware of what it takes to achieve mode shift, but the process, how do we get there? What do we need to do in terms of funding, in terms of coordinating with other municipalities, with regional organizations, and how do we start to prioritize projects and evaluate projects and drive funding decisions that can help us make progress towards those mode shift goals? So this is what this proposed study would focus on.
Thanks, Rana. So yeah, I guess on the mode shift one, I don't know if I fully understand I guess what I'm trying to logic through is like who the audience is for that study, and then what would they do differently based on the results of that study, right? It's like, is the audience municipalities? Is it MassDOT? Is it MPOs? And if so, what would they do different? Like it mentions like blue bikes in the description, right? To what extent blue bikes network expansion would aid in mode shift? Like we're already doing a ton to expand blue bikes. Like, you know, like I guess I'm not clear on what the nexus is between results of the study and action, like changes in what might happen as a result. So that's just something I'd be curious about. Tegan?
Yeah, thanks, Derek. I think I can speak a little bit to that, but I would also invite other board members to respond. I think some of the thinking around the framework for this study also stems from a couple of things. One, we've been hearing board members talk about how you all can revise your own processes, be they further refinements to the scoring criteria, be it establishing more aspirational targets in certain areas, be it talking about kind of some level of like policy statements as a board. And then also, as we're going into ramping up for the LRTP process, I think this kind of exploration can help set a better basis for understanding that, particularly as an MPO in this regional space and with these planning programs and the scope that you have over, you know, scoring and selecting projects and funneling federal funding. That's a lot of F words that were very similar. Sort of how sort of knowledge about what it would actually take to make a difference can inform a lot of your decision making and all of those different elements of what you do. So I don't think I framed that very concisely, and I apologize for that. But it kind of builds on a number of things we've been hearing from the boards lately. How do we set more impactful targets as an MPO? How do we continue to adjust our scoring criteria? How do we ensure that the projects that we're funding are actually making a difference, right? And so kind of building it up and looking at what MPOs in particular and other entities are doing and what seems to make more of an impact, I think is a powerful thing for the MPO as a body in and of itself with a regional focus to gain a better kind of baseline understanding for.
Thanks, Tegan. Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, so just kind of keeping in mind like the audience seems like in that context, maybe the MPO and like helping to support decisions, which makes sense. Are there other comments on that one? Or others? Leonard.
Well, I guess I heard Tom and I'm kind of wondering if anything that's been said since Tom raised that point about he doesn't feel that these projects will benefit folks in his area. If anything's been said that makes him feel a little differently, because I feel that it's important that we not make the non-inner core members feel left out.
Tegan or Tom?
Oh.
I don't
No, I haven't changed my thinking on any of that. I don't see any mode shift taking place out here. I'm skeptical as to whether it's going to take place in the city either. I think we might see people shift moving out of the city.
All right. Well, no, it's a legitimate answer. So thanks. Yeah.
Tegan?
Yeah, and Tom, that answer doesn't surprise me at all. What I would just point out is that $150,000 is a very small percentage of the total PL funding.
Oh, no, absolutely. I'm not saying that. That's why I'm saying there are those other ongoing studies.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I'm not trying to shoot this down. It just doesn't excite me.
I can completely understand that. And I think that's a totally valid point. And what I think we're sort of in a little bit of a transition in terms of how we work with this committee to really elevate the broad set of work that we do as a staff, and also how we're really kind of opening up our programmatic work. So it used to be that this was a space where we really highlighted where new initiatives were being brought into the MPO process. That's now happening throughout our program development process on an ongoing basis. And in particular, these studies are these very kind of, annually focused, sorry, my cat is attacking me while I'm talking, so I'm gesturing. These discrete studies in particular serve a very particular kind of purpose of identifying very discrete, a single kind of deliverable that's oriented towards doing some work that doesn't really kind of sit comfortably within an existing kind of planning and prioritization process that we already have going on. And so I think these are an interesting set of pieces of our work. But in terms of what's relevant for, this is not necessarily the space within our MPO that I would look towards, like equity in terms of how we're addressing the needs of every different subregion and all the different needs of our region. And in fact, what we need to do and what we're working to do is do a better job coming to this committee and talk about the body of the work as a whole that we're doing and how that addresses the variety and diversity of the needs across the region and sort of what we're doing to take that into account. So I'm not surprised that you say no, and I totally agree with I mean, maybe not totally agree. I don't know if Ronak actually has some further clarification of maybe how some of these studies are more relevant, but I understand your comment completely, and also want to do a better job of talking through in this format more how we are addressing the diversity of the needs in the region through our ongoing federally funded work.
Yeah, no, and that's fine. I guess just in terms of picking one of these 4 scenarios, it doesn't matter to me. Anyone's fine.
Ronak?
Yes, I'd like to share a little bit about the multimodal mobility infrastructure program because I didn't get a chance to do that and we're running out of time. Hopefully this will address some of Tom's concerns. So in that program, we have been focusing on doing corridor and intersection studies. We recently presented a couple of intersection studies to the board, and we are wrapping up our corridor study focusing on the Route 37 transit priority corridor in Braintree. We should be able to present that sometime in May. And we've also been working on thinking more deeply about the scoring criteria through which we select sites for our next corridor and intersection study. So we're revisiting how we have done that in the past, and we are now placing additional priority on regions that we have not worked in at all. And part of that has been to look at studies we have done in the past 10 years, and we've created maps with those locations highlighted. And it's pretty clear to see some gaps in regions and areas which we have simply not done work on in the past decade, and we want to prioritize that. So in our scoring criteria, we are assigning extra points to regions that we have not worked in previously.
Thanks, Ronak. Leonard?
And you see, that's all very interesting, you know, and it's helpful to know that. And I think maybe what we need to think is like, does this UPWP committee do more, you know, than, you know, pick the 3 studies and then approve the amendments, you know, to the UPWP, you know. As I said, when I first started doing this, we would see, you know, these the corridor studies and the multimodal big intersection projects that were queued up. We didn't get to vote on them because we pretty much said these have been decided. You know, I was kind of hoping that we might go in the direction of being able to give some input, as to what projects were either proposed or selected. And I realized that means a much heavier lift on the members of the committee, and maybe that staff has decided, you know, the members of the committee just can't do that lift. As much as they might want to, just don't have the wherewithal to do it. And so staff needs to make that decision. But to the extent that we can be involved at all, like the criteria, that's, as people know, I love criteria and helping to develop or at least understand criteria. But that's what you said, you know. I'm sorry. Ron was very informative. Thanks.
Thanks, Leonard. And certainly, yeah, we've had presentations from other program leads. So I think that seems of interest, right? Maybe for future meetings to have folks come and talk about those ones in particular, right? Those kind of more corridor studies, multimodal programs. We could have folks come and talk to the committee. Okay. All right. So Srilekha, can you remind us of the timeline for the UPWP again?
Yeah, so I'm hoping to present a draft of the full UPWP in early May. The date that I'm looking at right now is May 9th, but I don't want to overcommit there. So working backwards, the decision on discrete studies affects primarily chapter 4, as well as a bunch of other text within the document. So if we're able to make a decision, I think that would be best, but I am also not going to, push the committee one way or the other. It's really up to you.
Or yeah, I don't want to I don't want to delay the process. I also want to just make sure I have sufficient time to kind of run some of these by others, and especially with the roadway pricing being in 3 of the 4 scenarios, and I hadn't seen the scenarios, so I wasn't kind of sure which ones to give more attention to. I might feel more comfortable personally taking some time, at least like a week, to figure out, like for roadway pricing, just as an example, right? Like, I don't know what the task force is looking at for that. And like, it might be helpful to understand whether the analysis proposed here is going to be of use to them or something that they're doing anyway. I think that would be helpful to me, because it's a really interesting idea. Like, involves the use of replica data. I just don't I don't know if there's some information we might be missing about studies that they're already doing. So I guess that's what I'm hung up on a little bit, is not feeling like I have full information on that. But Tegan, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, no, far be it from me to discourage people from gathering more information. I know that it's really important to process these things, and if you didn't see the scenarios in advance, it's tricky. What I did want to just sort of add to the consideration is that these 4 studies captured, at least at this very high level, what we felt were the best options and the most potentially sort of impactful in terms of the structure within the subset of studies that you saw, and or we replaced some, / modified them. The descriptions of the studies themselves are still at that really early stage. And so I think there's that caveat that while there are some details written into these descriptions. What we're really putting forward here is the general concept. And if there's a desire, if there's a general interest in these studies being in place, but a desire to sort of dig more into the whys or exactly how those studies take place, those conversations will obviously continue to happen as we approach the federal fiscal year, as they always do. Like, these studies really can and do shift as we get closer to the beginning of the federal fiscal year, and then also as we carry them out. So just that caveat too, that we don't have these, you know, drilled down to the specific detail either, just based on how early this is in the process.
Got it. Yep, that makes sense. Yep. Thanks, Sagan.
So-
Totally understood. Yeah.
Yeah, in some ideal world, if we had some general consensus that there was, you know, leaning towards these general areas and the general intent of the studies, that would be wonderful. But again, understood if folks need more time to process it, or if there was general consensus that there was one of these ideas that, you know, this committee was like just not interested in advancing because of its focus, you know, that would be interesting, helpful for us to know. But again, understood if time is needed to process.
Yep. No, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just me personally, like if I had to pick one, I'd pick scenario 3, just because I think it seems to capture a lot of what folks are interested in. I think, you know, I could see how each of those would lead to useful results, but I'm curious, do others, I know we're at time too, but is there a sense of what folks want to do? Do we want to try and get consensus today? Do we want to kind of take time to consider this, and maybe try to meet again like sooner rather than later to, you know, make sure there's sufficient time for staff to factor this in? What's the sense from folks on that?
Well, I'm sorry, Pete. I mean, hey, I would be willing if others could, to stay a few more minutes, maybe to give a little straw poll. Maybe that might be informative to staff. Otherwise, maybe if staff wants something from us sooner rather than later, maybe we could have another meeting, after the meeting on the 18th. So yeah. So I have some flexibility. That's it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's a good idea. Thanks, Hunter. David?
I think 3 is fine. I'd rather not meet next week, is school vacation week, so I don't know how many people are not going to be here.
Right, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Is theft a problem with these freight bicycles that I saw, sort of the photos now? That's sort of I don't know. Just wondering about that when they're driving around with all these deliveries just out in the open without a vehicle. Maybe that's an aside, but I'm fine with 3 or staying a little longer to see if we could come up with a consensus.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, David. Tom?
I agree with David on that. 3 looks fine to me. I think, and again, I was thinking the same thing. School vacation week, caused us to go another week, and I don't know how that, so I'm fine with hanging in for a little while longer to see if we can come to a consensus.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. So sounds like there's general, I think that's 4 of us that have mentioned we like 3. I don't know, are there any other members that want to kind of, I guess, voice a preference, or should we do a poll?
Well, I could go with 3, but I really like mode. I really like to explore the mode shift, especially the way that Tegan described it. But if we have everyone but me holding out for that study, I will just happily go along with scenario 3. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom O'Rourke.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to be away next week, so I love scenario 3.
Okay. All right.
There's no excuse with Zoom.
It's called
That's dangerous. Dangerous. Everything that no excuse, bathroom breaks now, back to back. Take it with you.
Yeah. Jim?
Sorry, I do have to get to a 2. But I'm fine with scenario 3. I do, I always think it's good to keep, like, to Len's point, exploring, mode shift, but I just wonder if that's not enough of an effort, right, to really do it justice. So, yeah, I could be good with 3 as well.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Tegan?
I just want to offer that if we're hearing from folks in this room that they're still interested in something like this mode shift idea, it's something we can also continue to consider. Does it sort of, again, work into another process that we're engaging in through the multimodal program or through the long range planning process? So just hearing you say that is helpful, even if you vote on a scenario that doesn't necessarily include the work. So just putting that out there too. This isn't so like black and white where it'll be like, if you don't do this, then it'll never happen, right? So thank you for your input and for voicing that, and that's helpful.
Thanks. I will not cry my pillow tonight. I will not cry myself tonight, Tegan.
That's my goal, is you not crying.
Okay, yeah, and I think we all like support that idea. Right? I think we all believe that this needs to happen. Mode shift is really critical. I think it's just a question of like, is it part and parcel of everything? In the UPWP, I think there's a lot of ongoing work that addresses it. And then, yeah, how does it maybe factor into the next LRTP kind of thing? But yeah, I think, and I just want, be clear that, I mean, MassDOT is very supportive of the idea of mode shift. It's just a matter of, I think it's such a complicated topic. The term itself, mode shift, is hard even to like wrap your arms around sometimes, and what it means and what it would take to really do due diligence to study it thoroughly and get something that would be meaningful. So I just want to note that too, that it's something I think, we also make clear that we support. It's just a matter of, the best way to kind of study it and what's meaningful. Okay, well, I feel like there's general consensus on 3. I don't know if others, is there anyone that wants to make a case for a different scenario, or do we want to try and take a vote or motion or get it on the record that that's our general consensus, and maybe we can bring it back just to make sure, there's no significant red flags with it. But for now, just to get a sense of what we're kind of agreeing to generally. Is there anyone else that wants to make a case for a different scenario? All right. Well, I don't see any. Did Srilekha or Tegan, did you want like a vote on a scenario today, or do you feel like the discussion is enough to kind of, I'm good either way. I'm just curious if it would help to have it documented to take a vote.
If you're comfortable with holding a vote, and I think that would probably be best to just have it on the record. If that's okay.
All right, great. Yeah, so I'll ask someone just to make a motion for scenario 3 or whatever scenario. But it sounds like scenario 3. So Tom?
I'll make a motion to approve scenario 3.
So that's fine. I'll second that.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments before we do the roll call? All right, seeing none. Julie Wallers?
Julie Wallers, yes.
I believe Jim Fitzgerald said he had to leave, right? So I won't call him Jim. David Kozis?
David Kozis, yes.
Tom O'Rourke?
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Tom Bent?
Tom Bent, yes.
Leonard Diggins?
Diggins, yes.
Great, and chair votes yes as well. So, okay, so that'll be the kind of preferred scenario here. So that's helpful, everyone. And then we'll be sure to present it to the MPO as such. Were there any other agenda items for you like that? Do we have a member item, or is there any other business?
I think the only 2 items on the agenda were members items and then next meeting.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I know we're over time, so appreciate everyone staying a little late to get that on the record. And now we, certainly don't have to meet next week. Is there, anything else before? If not, I'll ask for a motion and second to adjourn.
A quick request.
Oh, go ahead,
would someone please mail me Maybe the rest of the team, the chat, there are a lot of interesting links in there I'd like to check out at some point. Appreciate it. And then I'll do a motion to adjourn.
Great. There a second?
I'll second it.
All right. Without objection, we're adjourned. So thank you everyone again, and have a great vacation week if you're taking time off, and we'll see you soon. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.